So I've heard more chatter about the possibility of a fake nuke attack. Um, I tend to be like a little bit ahead of this shit. Not because I have any sort of prescient sort of understanding, I don't see the future or anything. I'm just always trolling the internet for, not trolling, but trawling the internet for stuff, and at artist level, like before the whole monkey thing happened, I was talking about how they had the monkey truck crash in New Jersey, and what was the other thing, like, oh, the food shortages, and now they're blowing up the fuel supply lines. It's like they keep telling us, right, that it's going to be a rough winter. There's going to be a food shortage. We think there's going to be food shortages, and there's going to be blackouts because there's going to be power problems, and then they go around destroying all the food, and then they blow up the pipeline. It's like, well, yeah, we're going to have those problems because you fucking guys did it. And this is all like the mainstream media too, but some people can read that, right, and like put that concept together that it's them doing it. I mean, they've done that with everything. Oh, I think we're going to have an outbreak of a disease. Oh, I think we're going to... And then they make it happen. But if you mention that, you're an absolute fucking conspiracy weirdo. But it's like they're trying to bring about the revelation in a sort of ham-fisted way. Like they're doing it themselves. With everything they've done that is mentioned in the Bible, the food shortages, the division. Well, I don't know if they talk about division. Well, I don't know. A lot of the atmosphere that is related to the end times, the final days, they're putting into motion. They're doing themselves. But even if they do it themselves, right, and they create the circumstances for it, and it happens, well, I mean, it's still the real final days, I guess, even if they create it. I mean, I don't know how that works. I know they're a little bit antsy. They want their Messiah to return. I remember, like, 5 years ago, Netanyahu was giving some kind of public speech, some kind of address. And when he was done, he's coming off his podium thing, and he gets surrounded, all these people always want to talk to him, and a little crowd will form. Oh, hold on a second, I'll get by this. That's like what happens with politicians. Whenever they're done speaking, they come off the little thing, and then they get a crowd around them as media stuff. This was in Israel, and all these rabbis kind of swarmed around. They pushed through everybody, and they had they're like the serious ones, the ones that have the little squares on their head, the black square. Those type of guys, all decked out, and they were I don't want to paraphrase because it's, the basic gist of it was they were growing impatient with the return of the Messiah. And they're like, kind of, that what's happening? We're waiting a very long time for this. Maybe they're all older rabbis, so maybe they were like getting a bit antsy. They want to see it happen in their lifetime. They want their 2,000 goyim slaves or whatever the fuck they get. And their Messiah, is not our Messiah. Their Messiah is a different one. So they're kind of pressuring him, and he's like smiling and talking to him and stuff. And I'm like, are they trying to tell him to hurry up with revelations? Like, how do you do that? Well, we're seeing how they do that. They create the circumstances that are normally understood to be part of the end times. Just like going around blowing up the food, blowing up the energy, creating these infectious kind of diseases that like aren't real, you know. And then when the cure is administered, it has the effect of the of what the thing was supposed to be. Fauci kind of mastered this in the 80s with AIDS and AZT. AIDS itself and HIV, it's a non-conclusive diagnosis. It's basically they ask you a lot of lifestyle questions, and if you meet certain criteria, then they can say, well, it's probably this, meaning, you know, HIV or AIDS. There is no way they can figure that out. If they see a depletion in white blood cells, I mean, that's something that could be naturally occurring in people over time. It has a sort of, it'll wane and wax and wane. I think I might have a Karate Kid thing mixed up in my head. But so what they do is they take the information from the patient, and then they go through a lifestyle kind of questionnaire thing with them. And that's how it was determined. I mean, it sounds crazy, but that's basically how it was done. So at that point, then they say, well, we got to get you on, you know, what was at the time, AZT. Yeah, I think people don't understand, like, or they don't see me. I'm like the invisible gauging. But so then, of course, they take the stuff, and then you end up like Freddie Mercury. They perfected it since then. Like, I know people on it that are alive, and, you know, they're living, they seem okay. Because they got it so formulated now that it's basically a subscription for life. You get a prescription subscription, and it'll make you a little sick, just sick enough to drive you to keep getting the stuff. But in the beginning, when they first started administering it to people, you know, there was a lot of deaths. Now, it could be because they were working out the bugs on that, or it could be because they wanted to have a lot of deaths in the beginning just to, you know, create the fear. It's probably a combination of both. It usually is. Like, that's usually what it is. It's a combination of a couple things. So, that's how they do it. So what they did is they took that basic concept, and the same guy, Fauci, and did it again on a much larger scale. But it's just they're creating the circumstances that are normally understood to be part of the end days. You know, I should have probably looked at it before I started recording this, but I bet there's a whole list of things I could go down that is associated with the end times that they've actually introduced into society. So then it becomes a question of, well, is it the real end times that they created it? I think when the Bible talks about the end of days, it's almost like they're describing something that's already happened. And I think that, I mean, there's a possibility with the resets of society, John Levy, that this has happened multiple times. We know it's happened at least twice, just by judging from buildings. You know, like, you'll have buildings in your town, those impossible architecture buildings that just couldn't be made today, even with all the time and all the money. We just don't have whatever technology they were using, which my theory is it was created with mind powers. Like, literally, it was made with the energy. That's a whole other fucking topic, though. But and then before that, you have the case of, like, mountain ranges that when researchers have studied certain areas that were mountainous, they found evidence of brickwork in the mountains. Like, these were buildings at one point that were melted or destroyed in some way. Melted, you know, is what it looks like. And that stuff, I think, would have been before the last one that we still see evidence from. The last one, you know, and this is just my theory, I don't think was as severe. It wasn't as much, they didn't use the same kind of destructive force. If you notice, pretty much every major city around the late 1800s had some kind of devastating fire. You know, we had like 3 of them here. Some kind of devastating fire that destroyed half the city. Or in the case of Boston, it's funny, the other thing in Boston, where there was a molasses accident, which destroyed a lot of the area in the downtown area. I think over by not the wharf, what the fuck is that? I only lived there most of my life. Wherever the New England Aquarium is, that kind of area was flooded. A molasses truck, right? This is a real story. You can, Wikipedia has a page for it. A molasses truck like tipped over or something, or got in an accident, and the molasses in the truck like destroyed all of the downtown area. That's, I mean, I don't know how big the truck was, but they don't really have to try so hard with these stories. I mean, years ago, I'd heard this story a long time ago, and I thought it was ridiculous then. You know what I mean? But now when you look at some of this stuff, boy, man, it's really crazy. But the thing is that, you know, no one's looking at this stuff. No one cares. I mean, even if you did explain it to someone, they'd be like, oh, wow, that's weird. Cheesecake Factory still open? You know, that's... And what can you do about that? Nothing, you know? But again, I would point to that some of these people, these beings that you think are people, are actually leftover tools from the educational system that was here before. Whereas your divine being, or us as a divine being, we're all split up into different points of attention, expressing themselves as individuals. We had to be taught in some way. I don't know if it was to good up our emotional intelligence, or just put us into situations where we would learn, you know. And to make that happen, you would have to have people here that were here for that express purpose. They had to be here before you were here, I would think. I mean, logic would dictate. So they couldn't have divinity. They would have to be like a tool. Like, you know, so when you came here and you had to have some kind of interpersonal interface that had to do with a lesson. Maybe you were learning how to, I don't know, be grateful or whatever the lesson was. It would require other people to interact with. But the people couldn't be the same as you. Or else, I mean, how could they do that, you know? They'd have to have these people here beforehand. And then, I'm not going to take the chance of trying to cut through this. Yes. Wow, that's like a clown band. How many people came off that thing? Jesus. All right, so, here we go. So, yeah, so that's just, you know, a theory I have. And, so a lot of those people are still here, or they're still being used, because as I pointed out before, a lot of the other things that would be considered a tool, a learning tool for the system, are also still being used. In fact, all the levels are like cranked to 100, which in effect makes this place a bit like a torture chamber. I've covered all this, so as far as I'm concerned, it's settled science. And it got me thinking, like, as I was looking at the daily threads about deaths among people that are being blamed on, in some cases, making your bed. And I'm thinking, yeah, they obviously want to kill off a lot of people, right? But if they work with our divine energy, and they need our energy to live off of, or to thrive off of, whatever they do with it, why would they want to be killing people off? There's a chance they could lose that energy to wherever it could possibly go. However, if they're killing off the tools, right, they don't have divine energy anyway. And you could kind of figure out, if you worked a little at it, who the tools are. You know, you'll see things like, as an example, you'll see like a mother do something terrible, like drive her car into a pond with her kids, and you know, this horrible type of stories. And you're like, how could a person do that? Because that woman was not a person like you. Lack of divinity is lack of empathy. You know, and that's how you see all these murders and tortures and, you know, terrible things that people do. That because someone with empathy just wouldn't do that. They couldn't do that. How could you murder a bunch of kids? I would say it's impossible. It's impossible. And people always say, like, it's mental health issue. The meme of mental health, and you know, trust me, that's been a big part of my life, having to deal with that whole thing. Yeah, I think what they're doing is killing off the tools, because the people that are running into the slaughterhouse, so to speak, with this thing, are really down for it. I was reading an Anon talking about his friend who had developed mitochondria, however you say that thing that didn't exist before 2020, which is just a cover-up for general poisoning. He was saying how his friend was having these heart troubles, and his doctor determined he'd have to come every certain amount of time, a couple times a year. But he was taking him off the list of heart patients. He was like, as long as you show up, you're no longer considered a heart patient. And his friend was really happy about this. And the reason he was happy about getting off the heart patient list is so that he could get his boosters. Yeah, so these people are just going to walk right into the slaughterhouse until they're dead. Who would do that kind of thing? Well, if you're a tool of the system, you don't have any divinity, you don't have any empathy, you don't have any empathy for others, you don't have any empathy for yourself, you're kind of just doing what the system suggested. You know, it makes these suggestions, and in fact, like, your job is to try to get the people with divinity to go into the slaughterhouse too. I mean, you see how they act. You know, we saw, it's been covered. You know, we all understand the way this works. You know, people have been kicked out of families for it, kicked out of their friend circles. The crazy thing is, and I was saying this the other day, the non-divine outnumber us by a lot. By a lot. There was one Anon that did some kind of mathematical equation just based on some kind of percentages of people that had taken it and had not taken it, and if indeed the people that were taking it were some kind of system tool, I think he determined just by his fun experiment math that we're like 10 to 15% of the population. And I guess that would make sense, because if it's a tool and you can just create people with it, you could probably create a lot of them. But there is a finite energy resource here. You know, I've learned that before, experimenting with how exactly did I do it. I was kind of egging on the system to come back at me. Like, sometimes it'll try to fuck with you, and if you fuck back with it, it'll fuck back with you. But then if you do it for a set period of time, it will stop doing it. Which that's just a short version of this experiment I did, which made me think that perhaps its energy is finite. Now, its energy comes from us. You know, we create our own prison. We create, you know, unknowingly, unconsciously, you know, because they get the energy from us. So it's not infinite. Or actually, it probably is infinite, but the thing that gums it up is whatever the system of transmutation that is being used, it can't keep running. Like, they have to, like, let it refill, or it slows down, or it gets bottlenecked. I believe or at least that seems to be the case, I think would be a good way to say it. And the energy they're using, like, is your own. But they need that to function, to live their existence as kings and queens here in the material realm, instead of being what they feel is a slave in the divine realm, or they live under subjugation. They don't like being below God. That's what the whole defecting angels thing was all about. Here they can live as kings and queens in the material realm by sucking off our energy. So maybe, as it is a farm, and they're trying to economize their cattle or make it a more efficient farming scenario, maybe getting rid of the tools that are already here is part of that. And that's where walking into the slaughterhouse fits in. Just a thought. I mean, kind of a new concept I've been toying around with. But I'd like to just add it to the record, because why not? Nice and cool in here. Yeah. I don't know. Is it here or there or anywhere? It all remains to be seen. Don't blame the teacher, blame the school.